This is the What Do You Know Emission System test. This is not going to take us very long, but emission system is closely related to engine performance. It's also closely related to engine repair because engine condition can actually cause emissions to be out of line. And so let's start by asking that vehicles primarily produce 3 harmful gases and 2 harmless beneficial gases. What are the harmful 3? Anybody know?
Carbon.
Ma'am?
Carbon.
Well, sort of. What you're thinking about is what the people have been squawking about on the news and all this here lately. But what is gasoline? HC. Hydrocarbons is what gasoline is. Okay, so what's the oxygen content of the air that we're breathing out here?
20%.
It's 21% oxygen and 78% nitrogen. Now, I've never measured that, but that's what it says everywhere in the books and all that. Okay, so 21 to 78% are your oxygen. A lot, incidentally, from what you were talking about, they're talking about carbon footprint, all this kind of stuff.
What's the 1%?
The little 1% is trace elements, just stuff. There's going to be little gases. Anyway, what we got coming in is we got O2. All right, so every one of these babies wants to get married to 2 of those, right? So what happens whenever this unites with that is it burns, and you wind up with CO2.
Carbon dioxide.
Yeah. Carbon dioxide is not bad. It's okay. Regardless of what you might hear on the news, carbon dioxide is not a problem. As a matter of fact, if our trees and our plants and our flowers heard that we were trying to produce less carbon dioxide, they would wrap their branches around our throat and say, "What is the matter with you? I need that stuff to breathe," So we're breathing out carbon dioxide. Our animals are breathing out carbon dioxide. And we've actually fine-tuned our vehicles so they're breathing out carbon dioxide, right? Go over there and turn that heat down a little bit. It's too hot in here. I mean, it's warm. We want it comfortable. We don't want to sweat, okay? So here we got hydrocarbons and oxygen going in. But here's another thing. We've also got nitrogen going in there, right? Okay, so when this combustion chamber temperature goes above 2,500 degrees, we're going to make various different nitrogen compounds. And this could be NO2, NO3, NO4, or whatever. And so because with this number right here could be anything, we're going to call it NOx, because we don't know what that factor is going to be on every molecule, right? Okay, here's another thing I like to ask. Take 100,000 molecules of air and get a sample of it. How much of that 100,000 molecules of random atmosphere that you grab is carbon dioxide?
What was the question again?
If you get 100,000 molecules of air that we're breathing out here, how much of that is carbon dioxide? 35 molecules out of 100,000 is carbon dioxide. 35. Now, you know how many of those carbon dioxide molecules are man-made?
25.
1. Absolutely 1. And so we're supposed to spend $1 trillion a year so that we don't produce that 1 in 100,000. The word stupid comes to mind, okay? All right, that's wanted to clarify that. Now, if you don't get enough, we'll talk about this in a minute, but if you don't get, the NOx aspect, let's just forget about that for now. If the mixture is too rich, if you got too much fuel and not enough air, you're going to get, instead of CO2, you're going to get CO. Because you're not going to get, there's going to be too much of this and not enough of that. It's like having, like in some countries in the world, because of whatever reasons, they've got too many guys and not enough girls. I mean, I'm serious. They got like 2 guys for every 1 girl. And then that's, a problem. If you're a guy, then you're looking for a sweetheart. These guys right here, they want to get married too. They only get 1, you got CO. That's poison gas you can't see and you can't smell, and it will kill you fast. Carbon monoxide is bad news. You know when people park in the garage and they crank the car and they die? That's because of carbon monoxide. That's what it is. Okay, if you don't get any, if this is when he gets married to 1, if he gets married to none, what you got is you've got this, which is soot and raw gas and that kind of stuff. So basically, if you go above 2,500 degrees in a combustion chamber, you're going to be making NOx because nitrogen combines with oxygen when you go above 2,500 degrees. The way that we take care of that is we recirculate some exhaust gas, because exhaust gas is inert, it won't burn, and that cools everything down to where it's not over 2,500. The bad part about it is if it's flowing when you're idling, it runs bad. But you won't notice it when you're driving down the road, however, it keeps combustion chamber temperatures lower. This is important stuff. Okay, so the stuff that we don't want is HC, CO, and NOx. CO2 is not a problem. We want the CO2 to be high, even your exhaust gas analyzer. If your mix is right, your CO2 will be high, and these other three will be low. This is measured in parts per million, and these are measured in percentages, right? That one right there, if you gotta have a 5 gas analyzer to analyze oxide of nitrogen. I've got a 4 gas out there. I don't have a 5 gas. All right. So anyway, those are your 3 right there that you're not wanting to. Now the other gases that comes out of there is O2 and H2O. Now, if you look around, it may still be out there. There's a website that talks about the dangers of dihydrogen monoxide. You ever heard of it? You ever heard of dihydrogen monoxide? Would you like to drink a glass full of dihydrogen monoxide?
Probably, since H2O is water.
It's water, man. That's all it is.
I don't want it then.
Huh?
I don't want it.
Well, water's dihydrogen monoxide is what it is. Okay, so one way or another, we're producing water. For every gallon of gas you burn, you're making a gallon of water. You notice how when you crank your car up in the wintertime, steam comes out and water drips on the ground and warms up. The vapors are so fine that you don't see it. But anyway, you're still making water. The harmless beneficial too is O2 and H2O. Okay, what is the exhaust gas recirculation system control? I mentioned that earlier. Oxides of nitrogen controls NOx. What's the optimum air fuel mixture for the cleanest burn? And this is sort of a standard physics term. Watch this. You're going to have to know how to spell this. There will be a spelling test. STOI. I need to make that S look better. Stoichiometry, which, if you put an IC on it, that's 14.7 to 1. Now, with the newer, vehicles, they play with that on each side of that 14.7 to 1. But as your oxygen sensor is switching back and forth above the half range, it's going on both sides of this just barely. It's a very slight move on both sides of that. Okay. Why was it necessary to remove lead from gasoline in the early 1970s? And why did they put lead in it to start with? It made the engine last longer. Did you know that, these little Bonnie and Clyde cars, the little...
Model T.
Yeah, those cars. You know how many miles you got out of one of those before you had to rebuild the engine? About 10,000 miles, anywhere about. But nowadays, you can get 200, 300, 500,000 miles out of a vehicle without ever having to work on, doing any major engine work on it. Long and short of it, the lead was in there because it coated the metal components inside there, the valve seats and all this stuff, and it made it last longer. Got it? Okay, so the lead was removed because it would coat the catalytic converter and cause it to clog up and not work, and so they had to get the lead out of the gas. As a matter of fact, you might even see some of the old stickers that were on gas pumps that would say contains lead for use as a motor fuel only and all that, Wow, that was sharp, wasn't it? Okay, there we go. I want to keep that up there. Black smoke from the exhaust. Oh, excuse me. What does the vehicle, what is the Evap, what vehicle emission does the Evap system control?
Exhaust?
Huh?
Exhaust?
No, the evaporating gas. The gas you're smelling whenever you're gassing up your car? We don't want that getting out here into the atmosphere. So what we do is we try to make sure that as the gasoline evaporates in the tank, we're going to capture that in a carbon canister, and then we're going to pull it out of there using engine vacuum and a control system. I was talking to Adam about that just a few minutes ago. That's what that controls. So if you pack your gas tank, and I think that's what this girl's doing out here, you basically begin to saturate the carbon canister, and that causes the engine to do, surge ahead whenever you don't want it to, and this kind of thing. One time this lady called me, or on the phone at the, I didn't even know her, but she called me on the phone when I was working at the Ford dealership, and they asked me to go talk to her. And she described what her Windstar was doing. She said it surges ahead without warning. I'll just be sitting here at the traffic signal, and it'll surge ahead. These newer ones, the OBD2 stuff, is subject to start purging the canister anytime. Now, I can watch the canister purge on my car when it's going down the road with my little fancy scan tool thing that me and Adam have been playing with. Got a smartphone and a Bluetooth hookup. And whenever you're really into it heavy, you're getting 100% purge. When you're cruising, you're getting about 30-something% purge. And there's times when there's no purge. But if it decides when you're sitting there idling at a stoplight to purge, and you've been packing a gas tank and a bunch of gas goes in there and the engine almost stalls, the engine controller will say, oh no, I need to catch the idle speed and speed it up. And it'll just surge ahead with you. And sometimes it's bad enough to really crash into the car in front of them sitting at a red light. So she described that. And I said, what, do you pack your gas tank when you're gassing your van up? She said, yeah, I always do. I want to make sure I don't have to buy gas before the next time. And I said, well, if you'll stop doing that, that problem will go away. When you pack the gas in there, hey, do you ever pack your gas? You ever pack it?
Well, I don't know what you mean by that.
Keep clicking and clicking and clicking after the pump clicks off, trying to get as much gas in there as you
pack
can.
something really tight,
Yeah.
packing your gas in.
Yeah, now, when your gas tank's already full, you're ding, 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 click, and then you keep putting a little more, a little more, a little more to try to get up to the next dollar. You ever do that?
Well, yeah, sort of. Not when the engine's full.
Huh?
Not when the tank is full. I don't do that.
Oh, okay. Well, a lot of people do. They'll keep trying to click, 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 and force more gas in there. You're supposed to have some airspace in the tank. And I'm going to show you something on the board up here in just a minute on that picture.
I did that go with it.
Second-rate amateur. What are you packing your gas tank for? Was that your diesel?
No, it was on that red truck right now.
Yeah, don't do that.
I didn't know I had a full tank of gas in it. I just put $10 in it. It was only not like $9. I was trying to put that.
Well, that's because the gas prices are down and you are used to putting more in there. That's what it is. I have that same problem. Okay, so one way or another, evaporative system is really important to understand, and I'm going to show you that. Black smoke from the exhaust is a strong indicator of what? It's one of the three. What did I tell you earlier?
I'm guessing hydrocarbons.
Hydrocarbons, good. That was a good guess. All right, so what actually happens at the molecular level when fuel burns in the combustion chamber?
Explosions. I have no idea.
Oxygen unites with the hydrocarbons. Hydrocarbons and oxygen are getting together. When it burns, that's what's going on. And it expands and it pushes on the piston, and that's where you're getting your burn. What does the term stoichiometric mean? What did I just tell you guys? 14.7 to 1. That's a balance of a good clean burn. Does alcohol produce more power and fuel economy than gasoline? Did you know how many, if somebody had two vehicles that were just alike with the same amount of miles sitting there side by side, and you were going to buy one of them and they were the same price, and they said this vehicle is a flex fuel vehicle and this vehicle is just a regular vehicle that's not flex fuel, which one do you think you'd be better off buying? The flex fuel vehicle that'll burn up to 85% alcohol, or the vehicle that's made to just burn straight gas and nothing else?
Yes.
Well, the flex fuel vehicle is going to have a better fuel pump, better fuel lines, better fuel injectors, because it's more robust, so it can handle that alcohol. So you're going to get a better, more robust fuel system out of a flex fuel vehicle. Now, when's the last time you saw a flex fuel vehicle? And how can you identify one?
Last semester.
No, you've seen one this semester. This gray one sitting right out here is a flex fuel vehicle.
Oh, I didn't look at it.
Doesn't say anything on the back of it. Doesn't say anything on it anywhere. But the 8th digit on that one is a V, which means it's a flex fuel vehicle. The people that drive it don't even know it, but they could pump E85 into that thing and drive it.
Can old cars have it?
No, huh?
Can old cars have it?
All cars?
Like, yeah, I mean like old cars. Can they have
Well, they started doing it in the 90s.
Okay.
You know, so not all cars, no.
It's like on my brother, like on the back of his Monte Carlos got flicks.
Yeah, if it's flex fuel. But see, like on these Fords, it doesn't typically say that. I mean, it can. Sometimes you'll see a little leaf in a highway, you know. But on that one there, it don't say nothing about it. You know, there's another one, the Dodge Caravan that we do our services on, that 05 Dodge Caravan. It's flex fuel. You know, and the only way you can tell is looking at the H digital serial number. You know, if you're looking it up on all data, it'll say 8th digit V flex fuel, 8th digit W, you know, whatever. But anyway, alcohol does not produce more power and fuel economy than gasoline. E85 typically is not as expensive, but you won't get as good a fuel economy out of E85 either, so there's always a trade-off. During a combustion event, why does the ignition spark burn out while energy is still available in the coil? What do I mean by that? Whenever the spark plug, you know, you're basically going to see a little squiggle on your scope where the points close, which is basically where it begins to saturate the coil. And then whenever these little, if you look, I say the points because that's the way we used to do that, and I got an ignition thing. You're going to see a firing line on your scope, and it takes that much power, you know, to, in other words, you got like, you know, 5, 10, 15,000 volts, right, up here. It takes that much power to jump across that spark plug gap because there's compression in there, but there's also gasoline molecules, and they're sort of conductive. The spark can run on those. All right, now, then this is going to come back down, and you're going to see a little table like this, and then you're going to see an upkick, and then you're going to see like that. That's what that pattern looks like. Now, this right here is the firing line, and this is the spark line, and this is voltage over time. So the distance from here to here is basically how many milliseconds of spark duration you had. Okay, now that upkick, when it goes up right before it goes away, the reason it does that and the spark burns out while this is leftover energy in the coil. It could have burned longer if it needed to, you got me? All right, so right here, this upkick that you're going to see is because it's used up all the fuel. And as it begins to use up all the fuel and those fuel molecules are being consumed, what you wind up with is the voltage. See, the resistance goes up and the voltage goes up together. So it goes up, and that's what that upkick is at the end of it. All right. Now, there's this guy named Mac Vandenbrink that's a guru for these scopes and everything. And he's got a little presentation he sent me to just as a sort of a sample. And this guy can look at a scope pattern on an oscilloscope and tell you if the camshaft lobe is rounded off. Which is, there's all kinds of stuff you can tell if you know how to interpret a scope pattern. But anyway, that's what that's about. When it goes up, it burns out because all the fuel's been consumed in that cylinder. And this right here, now watch this. If you're ever looking at a scope pattern and you see if it looks like that, then that means you got a weak ignition coil usually. You hear me? Weak ignition coil if you don't have those reserve energy squiggles. If you don't have leftover energy after that spark burns out, you've typically got a weak ignition coil. Now, let me tell you this too, because we're in engine performance and it's important. When you check for spark, typically, like if you're working on a car that's got, you know, spark plug wires and all that, where it's fairly easy to check for spark, and you pull your spark plug, your coil wire off or your plug wire. Let's say I like to pull a coil wire off if it's got a distributor cap with it going to the middle. And they always say that you should hold that spark plug wire, and I'm just drawing this to look like a generic spark plug wire. They say, oh, 1/4 of an inch, right there. They say it ought to jump 1/4 of an inch, and that's good enough. And that's in so many textbooks. And I've seen people that would come over there and they say, I don't know why this thing won't start. I'm having trouble because I'm checked and it had spark and I can't find anything else wrong and blah, blah, blah. And I say, well, I want it to jump about an inch. And I want it to scare the daylights out of me. Pow, 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 like a lightning strike, you know. If it doesn't have a really strong spark, then it's not going to start. Because it doesn't have enough spark to actually jump across that fire line. And I fixed a few like that. Check it, the spark's only real weak. You try to stretch it, it won't stretch more than about 3/8 of an inch, and it's yellow and orange. It's got a weak ignition coil. That's not complicated. Now let me tell you this. I told everybody this. I've been preaching this forever in here since I've been teaching. And this one guy went to work at a dealership, and he wound up working on, it was a Nissan dealership, he wound up working on a daggum Cadillac for some reason or another. And he pulled it in there to do some inspection stuff on it, just nothing. And when he went to start it, it wouldn't start. And I asked him after he had fought with it a while, I said, how strong was the spark? And he said, well, I don't know. And I said, so we pulled it, and it wouldn't stretch but about 3/8 of an inch. I said, put a coil on it. That'll take care of it. And so he did it, it fired up. See what I mean? So that, sometimes people get messed up if they if they see a little bit of spark to think it's okay. It needs to be loud and bright and scary whenever you're checking for spark. That's important if you're checking for a no start, right? If you see a loud, scary spark, then you can forget about your ignition and start looking for fuel or timing problems or whatever, you know what I'm saying? All right. So anyway, does everybody understand what to put down on 10? Why does the ignition spark burn out while energy is still available at the ignition coil? Somebody articulate what I told you.
All the fuel's burned up.
All the fuel's used up. Every molecule of fuel's been used up. If the engine's running too hot, which harmful gas increases? You ought to be able to interpolate that from what I told you earlier.
Hydrocarbon.
No, oxides of nitrogen. If it's running too cold, you get hydrocarbons and carbon monoxide. And that's the answer, number 12. All right. Now we're going to direct our attention to this picture up here on the wall. I didn't draw this picture. You got a sheet like this, and since I didn't draw this picture, I'm not going to point my video camera at it. You know what I mean?
12.
Huh? Number 12 is the cold gases increase as hydrocarbons and carbon monoxide when you're running too cold. When the engine's running too cold, that's one of the reasons the engine controller will throw you a PO 128 or a PO 125 if the thermostat's not working right. It's running too cold. An engine that's running too cold is just about always a thermostat every single time. Just about always. Now, what's this? Number 1. Who can tell me what number 1 is on this picture right here?
Cam phaser.
Close. This one doesn't have cam phasers. What do you think that is? Now, what is it? What's number 2? 1 and 2 are closely related.
2 is a cam sensor, right?
2 is a cam sensor, and number 1, and this is where you're thinking. You're thinking about a cam sensor, but on just about every engine nowadays, you have a little toothed wheel, which they're not typically like the one I showed you on the engines like this one's illustrating. That's basically the reluctor wheel for the cam sensor. So, cam sensor reluctor. And then number 2 is the chem sensor. Okay, you got that? Now at the end of the semester, I may give you this again just to see how much of it you remembered. So burn this in, y'all. Okay, number 3 is what? Somebody tell me what number 3 is.
Is that the first oxygen sensor?
Oxygen sensor is number 3. Notice it's in the exhaust. And which bank would that be, do you think?
1.
Okay, now here's an interesting little, and you know this because...
Because 4 is bank 2, because it's coming out of the catalytic converter.
Well, look at the little tiny words there, like right under number 1. It says bank 1. They're actually telling you which is bank 1 and which is bank 2. Okay, listen to this. This is important too. Bank 1 on a Ford is different from a Chevy and a Dodge. You're going to find bank 1 where the number 1 spark plug is. Wherever the number 1 spark plug is bank 1. Okay, now why is that important? Because if your oxygen sensors are HO2S11 and HO2S12 and HO2S21 and 2, you got to know which bank is which, because you could be working on the wrong oxygen sensor. Make darn sure you know which bank is which and know how those oxygen sensors are numbered. Because whenever this first started in 1994, I worked on a Thunderbird for 2 hours because I had the wrong oxygen sensor. I had those things numbered wrong in my head. And then I drew myself a diagram and it never happened again. Okay. Now, what you got here, number 4 is what?
Muffler.
Please.
It's right above the 4. Right under the 4.
Am I going to put a 4 there where the words say muffler? That sensor in between the catalytic converter and the muffler is the catalyst efficiency monitor sensor. And it's measuring oxygen storage capacity, and it's supposed to shift a lot lazier than the one in the front. And I'll tell you something else. If they're switching together, you're probably going to have a PO 420, which is a code telling you the catalytic converter is lousy.
So number 4 is what?
Number 4 is a catalyst efficiency monitor oxygen sensor. It's an oxygen sensor almost exactly like those other ones. Usually, when the vehicle's new, the connector for that oxygen sensor behind the catalyst will have a different color to the connector for that. Okay, now let's move on to number 5. We don't want to stay in here all any longer. We have to. Notice you've got the air the intake manifold, there's air passing through there. Number 5 is the EGR valve. You notice there's a tube coming from the exhaust, coming up over there into the EGR valve. And as the EGR solenoid, which is controlled by the engine controller, these little curved lines or wires, they actually open that EGR valve and it lets exhaust gas go in here, which is inert. And as it's carried in here, it's going to be usually right behind the throttle body on most vehicles, or it'll be somewhere where they'll have one little sort of a hole going into each cylinder down in the intake manifold so that every cylinder gets the same amount of EGR. If something clogs up and one cylinder is getting a lot of EGR and the rest of them aren't getting any, that cylinder will misfire when the EGR kicks in and starts to work. But that's another story. Now let's move on to number 6. Where's number 6? I can't even see number 6. Where is it? Somebody help me find it. Oh,
Slide number 7.
what's number 6? Vacuum line, big thing going into the valve cover. Can anybody say PCV valve? Positive crankcase ventilation. That's what that is, PCV. What it does, there's some blow by that goes past the piston rings. You don't want that pressure building up in the crankcase, so you're going to pull it into the intake. You're going to consume it with the rest of everything else, and that's how you process it. In the olden days, they'd put a little vent pipe coming out the side of the crankcase, and all of that poisonous gas would get out into the air. In 1963, I think it was, or 62, Chevrolet put a PCV valve on the Corvair, and that's the first time that anybody ever put a PCV valve on anything. All right, so here we've got number 7 is a fuel injector. That's not too hard. You notice you got the little curved wires coming out. That's giving you your pulse width. Now look at number 8. Where's number 8? Number 8 is the oxygen sensor for bank 2. All right, so this is going to be bank 1, sensor 1, bank 2, sensor 1. This one does not have, I mean, they go to these two pipes go together into one pipe before it goes to the catalyst. So you've only got a 3-sensor system there. If it had 2 catalysts, you'd have 2 catalyst monitor sensors. And also, something else that's not illustrated here, you'll actually have the catalyst up here and another one down here. This particular one is drawn for simplicity, but you'll have a light-off catalytic converter that takes care of your oxides of nitrogen, and then you'll have the catalytic converter with another brick in it that takes care of your hydrocarbons and your carbon monoxide. So anyway, that's another story too. We'll get into later talking about that. All right, now let's see. What's next? Number what?
9.
Number 9 is, what is that? That's a coil on plug, right? What's number 10?
Where is number 10?
Right there, where my little hand is. See that? You notice you got a fuel pump pumping through the fuel filter, going to the fuel rail. Right here you've got, yes, exactly, carbon canister.
I almost said accumulator.
Huh?
I almost said accumulator.
Yeah, you're thinking air conditioning, aren't you? Okay, on this particular one, you notice the fuel pressure regulator is inside the gas tank, so that you've only got it's a returnless fuel system. Now your fuel pump, which you guys got carnal knowledge of yesterday on that Ford. All right, so we replaced this fuel pump. We got a fuel pump relay operated by the computer that drives the fuel pump. You got a fuel level sensor. You got a pressure sensor. That's number 17. We're jumping ahead. That actually is going to measure the pressure in the tank when the evaporative system is testing to see if there's a leak anywhere. It'll basically close the vent solenoid, and then it'll close it'll let vacuum in there, and then it'll hold it, and it'll see if it bleeds back up by watching that sensor, and that's how you get that. Now, number 11, what would number 11 be? Number 11 is going to be, what?
A relay of some sort?
What do you think?
I don't know.
That right there, on the ones that have it,
Is that the throttle position sensor? Wait, I feel stupid saying that, but
no, that's actually the vent solenoid. See that? That right there, you notice right here, the air that is pulled through that carbon canister has got, the vent solenoid on an enhanced evaporative system has got to be able to stop that up so that it can deliver vacuum here, and it can see by watching that little pressure sensor right there if that pressure bleeds back up. You notice the shape of that gas tank? when you fill it up, there's always supposed to be some airspace in there. That's why gas tanks have got that oddball shape to them. All right, now then, you got your number 16. What is that? Notice it's in the air cleaner.